Hello everyone, and welcome to our sessions on digital heritage inspection and survey, which are kindly funded by Historic England. This is a programme of 10 sessions for learners of different experiences and backgrounds to find out more about how digital models and digital twins are being used in the heritage sector. There's a WhatsApp group where the learners can co-mentor and share resources too. My name is Lynda and I'm your host today. I'm a Chartered Building Surveyor and Fellow of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. Our practice, Job Clues, specialises in the survey and repair of historic buildings. I'm going to introduce Paul Bryan. He's here today. Where's Paul? Hello.
I'm here.
Paul, I need to thank you because you were the first project mentor, weren't you, for this project?
Yes, that seems so long ago.
Yes. Well, it was a while ago. Yeah. And you'll see a clip of John. You know, he's done an amazing job looking after us as well for Historic England. So I have to say, on behalf of our team, how grateful we are for the funding and how much we've enjoyed doing this. It's been an absolute privilege. And I'm so grateful for for your trust in us and, helping us to get this done. Tell us a bit about yourself, Paul, because you're still busy, even though you're retired, aren't you?
I spent 40 years in the survey industry, basically from when I graduated to the last day that I walked out of Historic England. And most of that time was spent in heritage survey, either working for English Heritage or Historic England. Since I've retired, I haven't been able to switch off, and I don't think I will ever be able to switch off because I'm just so interested in what's going on in the industry, in digital heritage inspection and survey, for instance. There's always new technologies coming along. It's like just this very morning, watching the local news, and Historic England with their Spot the Dog scanner on a robotic dog appeared.
You watched that all the way through. How did you feel about that when you were watching then from home this morning when Spot was out doing his work?
Well, I met John for a few drinks last night anyway, so he basically filled me in on what might be happening. But it's really interesting to see, that we've got platforms like that are, I wouldn't say autonomous, they're semi-autonomous. But I can't help think that the dog will be replaced by a robotic human very, very shortly as well. And then there's all the different sensors. You've got the drone there flying around inside, capturing the upper levels as well, flying into spaces that may be difficult to get to. I was quite proud, to be honest, proud of John and the team and, what they've been able to achieve even since I left.
Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. And I think that was one of our best sessions when John, we'd been on a fairly dry subject because we were talking about risk assessment and how, we keep each other safe. But obviously these remote inspection tools, that's what they're so brilliant for. And also because we get excited about the technology, it's been really lovely. I was just saying, John, how grateful we are for the funding that we've had from Historic England and how much we've enjoyed it. We're going to give you a bit of a rundown, a bit of a retrospective of what happened in each of the sessions. So if I can take you back to the opening plenary session, it was a bit like this, except that we were all nervous and we didn't quite know what was going to happen. So I did a lot of housekeeping notes. I gave a bit of a précis about where, the history of reality capture that went a little bit like this for the people who missed it. And it's thought to depict Giovanni Niccolò Arnolfini. It hangs in the National Gallery, and it's really significant for all sorts of reasons. But the main reason that's significant to me is that it comes from a time of when photorealism started to exist in painting. Before this, perspective was usually quite flat. And there's an amazing piece of research, which I will give you a link to, by David Hockney, about how it's thought that it was the use of optical tools, such as the curved mirror that you can see in this painting, that enabled artists to capture perspective accurately.
And to some extent, that's where our story of reality capture for historic buildings starts.
So I'm going to hand over now because I think Richard's going to give you a rundown of what happened next, because we went over to session 1.
Session 1, the guest was Greenwood from Christians. This session covered laser scanning, photogrammetry and 3D modelling software, the steps taken to produce a model and the importance of accuracy. The case study was Liverpool Anglican Cathedral. I think we've got a short video with that model to play.
As it enables seamless reviewing, planning and collaboration, whether you're producing 2D plans, 3D models or photorealistic visualizations.
So, session 2, following on from the previous session, looked at workflows, data files and storage, processing data, point clouds, cleaning and referencing raw data, integrating data, future trends, BIM, and the balance of accuracy versus optimization. The discussions and questions were around decimation and also led by the poll, which was, do you think digital models and digital twins are 2 different things?
The way to digitalise a building is by creating a 3D model from the survey data. These models can be developed using softwares like SketchUp, 3ds Max and Rhino, but the most widely used building modelling software is Autodesk Revit. Revit is more than just a 3D modelling tool. It also enables building information modelling, which is what BIM stands for, enhancing project coordination and data.
The one that came next was session 3, which was all about making and sharing models. Our guest on session 3 was Tom Martin from Mann. It was a really interesting session because we talked about different types of uses you might put it to, and Tom showed us just how easy it is to make your own model even if you're not a geospatial surveyor. And so I've got a clip for you.
Yeah, pretty much. I think you've covered everything there. So I work for an engineering consultancy now called Mann. We do an awful lot of work in heritage buildings, both in sort of pure conservation of standing ruins and down to sort of refurbishment projects, and do manage to fit in a few more normal engineering projects in there as well. So essentially, this was modelled using photogrammetric system, which uses sort of digital photography to build a 3-dimensional model. And we ended up doing this over 3 phases of the project. So this model on the right-hand side is the sort of middle phase. The first phase was done before large amounts of vegetation clearance were done. This phase was sort of the ready to do work phase.
Session 4 was risk, compliance and ethics, and the guest speaker was John Bedford, obviously here today, thank you. The session covered UK statute, data protocols and security. There were examples how to navigate recording a building at risk, particularly with the very famous RoboDog.
The dog is rather more generously sort of, it's got a much better battery life. We can get about an hour to an hour and a half of use out of the dog before we have to change the battery and bring it back. For the drone, you know, our ranges are limited by things like Wi-Fi. For the dog, we use mesh radio communications, which in theory can allow us to communicate with that over 5 kilometers. But, you know, in practical terms, it means that we don't lose sight, we don't lose the connection with that sensor, with the dog itself. Through buildings with very, very thick walls. We habitually are working with, you know, I mean, many of the places we work at have extremely thick walls.
So in session 5, which was applications in heritage at risk, we had Louise Priestman from Shaw and Jagger Architects. This session looked at heritage at risk, quinquennials, planning, monitoring, recording and disaster recovery. We had 3 case studies: Tonedale Mills, Darwin Tower, and the Church of St Edward the Confessor in York. And I think we've got a little clip of Louise talking about the planning process for churches.
The understanding of the planning legislation of the Church of England. Now,
it is different. Some of you may already be aware, others might not be, that the planning process is very clearly set out. We all tend to know quite a lot about it in terms of the planning process of a planning officer and the process of an application, and then getting consent. And there's obviously different people advising throughout that. With a listed building, obviously it has its own support from usually a conservation officer and others such as archaeologists. Now, the fundamentals are not dissimilar with the Church of England and the church world, but it is slightly different in that they are effectively exempt from listed builder consent particularly on the fabric itself. However, if you are making an external change, you also need planning as well. So a good example is a project I worked on at Canterbury Cathedral, and we were looking at installing a hidden platform lift. Now, there is a clear boundary defined with churches and cathedrals, and everything within there is part of the measure, and everything external is obviously subject to typical planning permissions. Now, this particular lift was right on the boundary of Canterbury Cathedral, and as a result, we had to apply for scheduled monument consent, which is another conversation for another day, listed building consent, planning permission because of these are all because of the external changes and the boundary, and we needed CFCE consent, which is the cathedral measure consent, because the lift started within the boundary and lifted up over into effectively the secular world. So that was a really good, fun challenge. So sometimes when you're working on churches, you might think you've avoided some of the typical applications, and sometimes you can end up doing all of them.
Session 6 was amazing fun, actually, because it sounds really dry, doesn't it? We're going to deal with all the protocols and standards, and there's some amazing published work. And I know that both John and Paul had worked on the one for Historic England. We looked at documents from RICS and the Survey Association, and we went through some of the detail around accuracy and control, which is so important for geospatial standards. We had a couple of polls to find out which standards people were using, and it was good to see that the Historic England standard is being adopted, the newest one. And there was also a quick poll on who'd been to the Technical Tuesdays, because they're an amazing resource to use with this course as well. We had some talk about how we link into back data, and our guest on the day, James Kavanagh, who came from RICS, and he's always so lovely. Here he is talking about the Treasury.
I think that's the critical thing about that initial conversation with the client, is about what do they expect at the end of this. You know, I'm in RICS HQ now, and the Treasury building's just across the roads. You know, I've seen the front of that building scanned about 10 times. Okay, not for heritage purposes. The last time I went out and asked surveyors, why are you doing this model again for the umpteenth time? And it was basically so they could get an idea of the window sizes for the window cleaning contract. So sometimes your model is being used for things that you don't. So therefore, there's not a need really to go to 1:10 kind of scale, millimeter accuracy kind of detail. But surveyors will be hardwired to go to the highest level of accuracy that they can achieve, where your client needs may negate that and require a lower level of data capture to fulfill their requirements.
Session 7 was interpreting models, and the guest was Chris Jackson. The session covered models, the interaction with other data sets, accuracy and error control. The session also explored ways of sharing and viewing the models, such as the Faro web share and Sketchfab, with examples shown of both these models can be used for different purposes.
Yeah, Chris was an amazing guest. Watch this.
What you find with the survey industry at the moment is that everyone wants access to all the different bits of data. So the first thing you'll go is on site, and you'll put site control in using a total station and GPS to coordinate the site. And then you'll go and laser scan everything, and everyone wants access to the laser scan data, which would be your like a TrueView, Trimble, RealWorks View, Faro web share. There's a few others out. yeah, that's just the point cloud, which will give you your 360 views and you can take measurements. And then obviously from the point cloud, you would bring that into the photogrammetry software, combine it with, I think, 100,000 images we took of Liverpool Anglican Cathedral. So obviously it's quite a big folder, very big project, sorry. And then we have different levels of quality of that. So you have the main quality, which is 0.25 mil resolution, not accuracy, resolution. So you can zoom in, and the architects sent us screenshots of where he's found dead flies on windows and things like that. And then
we literally use the corner of too much information there.
Yeah, exactly. But then, you know, not everyone needs access to that crazy level of detail. You know, this is on here for the media team at the cathedral, who are using it for, they're using it for like fly-throughs, showing people, trying to raise money for, you know, renovation works, new schemes. So they only need access to a very low resolution model.
Session 8 on storage and archiving had the guests John Bedford and Andrew Knight from the RACS. And this session looked at understanding storage and archiving digital models, dealing with legacy systems, suppression and disposal policies, copyrights, intellectual property, and the consideration of sustainability when archiving. We looked at OASIS and the ADS, and the poll asked, do you have a disposal policy for digital materials? There was also some discussion about the challenges of cybersecurity and AI. And I think there's a little clip.
Yes, I quizzed Andrew, our guest, about policy on disposals.
I mean, it's a good point. We've not necessarily refreshed that in terms of the sustainability issue, where we have issued guidance in the past, and once again, that might need refreshing. It's really back to tort, and in terms of the length of time you should keep information from that kind of contractual position. So our advice historically has been mainly based around the requirement to keep data, whether it's digital or analog, you know, paper or digital, around tort, and the number of years one needs to realistically hold that to be able to deal with some issues that might come out from a contractual point of view. But it is a point that we should begin to look at that broader sustainability issue about data retention. There's obviously the whole around personal data. There's the whole GDPR thing around the need to stop, stop recording personal information when it's no longer required. But that's a jurisdictional requirement, but that we all need to be aware of what it's personal data. But I think if we think of the kind of large volumes of data you might collect on an asset, that's a different question. But I think it would once again come down to kind of those issues of contractual needs to retain the data.
In session 9, we went on to talk about grant funding and more generally about how this kind of model might be paid for, both now and in the future, especially to help people who are learners on this course who are thinking about commissioning models or helping their clients to achieve their goals. We had Nikki Dyer as our guest, who's great fun, but she's also a super expert on heritage lottery. And we also looked in at alternative forms of grant aiding. And I think this is Nikki talking a bit about match funding, which is really important.
I'm Nicola, currently freelance heritage project manager and consultant, but just come off a year with English Heritage as property curator for the South. And before that, project manager with the lovely Greenwood projects. So absolutely not a digital twin expert, but really interested, like I imagine most of you, in considering how it can be used within a project's context. And as Lynda alluded to, lots of experience with Heritage Fund projects. Previously, many moons worked for them, and since then, been a very lucky recipient with lots of projects of funding, which has really been the catalyst for making so much happen within the heritage sector. For example, Heritage Fund the highest intervention rate I've ever come across with heritage funds. So in other words, the highest proportion of total project costs I've known was a whopping 84%, which I think is fairly unusual, but quite often it's more around about 60%, which begs the question, where does the other 40% or 35% or 20% come from? And that's your match funding. Now, funders can stipulate, we will go up to this intervention rate and you have to find the rest. And what they're looking for really is commitment. So commitment across the board from other funders and investment in the outcomes your project's going to deliver. Now, match funding can be hard cash, which is always wonderful. You could, for example, get a funding picture that included majority heritage fund, some historic England, and the whole miscellany of, if you go onto the heritage funding directory, all those other funders who might want to support your work. But one of the most interesting ones to bear in mind as well is the concept of pro bono funding as well. In other words, some of your match funding can be made up out of a financial value, a nominal financial value put on your volunteer input.
Session 10 on procurement, we had our guest speaker, Dr. Bola Abisogan, and this gave an overview of procurement, different procurement routes, principles, legalities, as well as looking at specifications and market test protocol. The case study was of Darlington Street Methodist Church, and the poll asked, how do you work out a price for your client?
For those that are observing, I'm the Chief Excitement Officer. Yes, you heard me. Chief Excitement Officer of Digital Twin Skills Academy. My name is Dr. Bola Abisogan, OBE, and I'm a chartered quantity surveyor for my senior.
And how important is use case within the overall procurement process?
Yeah, so the easiest way to answer that question, what do you actually want to achieve, right? In simplest form. And use case really speaks to and for the why. Why are we doing this? Forget how much you want to spend for a minute. Why are you doing this? How do you want to use the data and the output? Who else should have access to the output? And how can you make it really easy for suppliers to understand what you really want? We can start there. The use case starts there. It's an idea. It's an ambition. It's even understanding what you don't want to procure, what you don't want to see at the end of the project, right? You've got to, I call that the upside down version of the question, right? What don't you want to happen?
Well, thanks everyone for going over the recap with us. I hope you enjoyed those sessions, and I hope it's brought back for you what we were doing. I'm going to run a quick poll now while we're still fresh about which session was which, because there was a lot, wasn't there? I'm going to ask you to just do a quick vote for me about which ones you found most useful. Okay, so quite useful and just what I needed is the vast majority, and I'm really glad about that. A couple of people waiting for catch-ups. I apologise if you haven't seen it, and the ones that you didn't get round to. So yeah, I think between the just what I needed and quite useful is looking like about 70% of what we provided was really good and useful content for you. So I'm really glad about that. I'm interested for bits of feedback really now. Got a question from James. Hi James. Are the previous sessions available to catch up on? I've issued one of them, which was I think session 1. In due course, when we finish the editing process, then we will share them more widely. How many people here are using the WhatsApp group? Are you enjoying that? There was some interesting stuff there. At the paper from Bryan, he dropped a paper in there which was about Sketchfab and how they've moved some of the models which were for cultural heritage into Fab Epic Games, which meant that there was less access than previously.
I think the WhatsApp group's quite useful, very useful actually. It's quite a good sort of platform to sort of feed into and sort of just ask a quick question. So I found that quite useful.
Is that normal for you at uni as well? Where you could
yeah, so we have a WhatsApp group at uni, so anything that we're working on, anything to collab with or anything it's just a platform or just a sort of bit of a community that you can just feel at ease to just say, looking at this or working on this, what do you guys think? Or here's some information might be useful to people. So I think that's quite handy to keep that open.
Yeah, I mean, we'll keep that up for a while, and it will give us the opportunity. I think Paul's arranged for us to meet again in York.
I assume you're talking about the Regal Geospatial Survey Symposium or something. Is that the one you're on about?
Yeah, on the 27th in York.
That's the one. Yeah.
And
I
it's
am
not a
speaking.
hybrid event. You'd have thought that was like a perfect thing to do as a hybrid.
Yeah. No, it's proved extremely popular. I was just telling David and John last night that it's sold out within a couple of days of the notice going out. I think it's a mixture of like sort of a technical presentation or a series of technical presentations by Regal on their scanners and drones and LiDAR sensors. But I think having people like myself, and then we got Keith from National Trust, and then Andy Beardsley, who's a commercial survey director, coming along talking about their use of technology within a commercial sense. I think that's what's made it popular. I hope it's not going to be a one-off. I've said to them I'm not really interested in doing an event if it's just going to be a one-off. They need to actually do more of these type events.
I think if any events do come up, if everybody can just drop them into the WhatsApp group, and we'll try and keep in touch that way. Any other suggestions about keeping in touch and future learning events we can do together? Now, in terms of subject matter, one of the other things I wanted to try and lead a discussion on here is where we might go next in terms of research. Whether this is like formal funded academic type research, or whether it's more sort of crowdsource, or which way can we go with this from what we've done on the course.
Can I just chip in on that, Lynda? I appreciate I've not been party to any of the sessions. I would just encourage you to continue doing something, whether it's funded, whether it's unfunded, collaborative, call it what you want. I think the ability to actually bring not just techie surveyors like myself and John together to sort of talk technical, but the actual end users of the data. And I was really sort of taken by some of the people that you've got in to talk about who are not directly involved in geospatial survey, but they're utilizing the products from it, and they're actually utilizing some of the terms. It's like Bowler from the Digital Twin Skill Academy. I was going to sort of raise the question, even just in this plenary one, you've thrown in terms like digital model, digital twin, BIM. I get a little bit frustrated, with people sort of just basically throwing these terms in without fully understanding what they are. But then I got in an argument with one commercial survey director, and he said they're just a means for communication. At the end of the day, they are basically survey models, digital data. And if it gets the message across, that's great. I'm going off the tangent of what we were talking about earlier.
I'm going to send you a clip, Paul, because we did a little poll. I think it was in session 2 after Kira talked about processing, and people were quite warmed up and in the idea of like all the different data sets that were coming together and formats and so on.
Yeah.
And we asked whether a digital model and a digital twin were the same thing, and there was like a spectrum of answers. And the more we drilled into it, the more not necessarily frustrated we felt. I can understand frustration, because part of our training as surveyors is sort of precision, isn't it? Try and be accurate about this or that. But the truth is that with the emerging technologies, that it's more important that we do communicate, like you say, that we stay in touch and do something than get too steadfast about how we deal with things, because the boundaries are moving anyway through the tech. I would like for people just to feel confident, like you say, to just put a toe in the water from wherever they are, and move along. My own feeling is that a digital model is part of a digital twin, in as much as it's the sort of geospatial end of it. But in a true digital twin, and I think Wynn's team have been really amazing contributors, Wynn and Stuart and all of those guys, talking about the back data and what you're actually using it for in terms of tagging data and planning interventions, is what makes it a twin and makes it, you know, a real communication tool. Wynn, did you feel like you're doing a little project where you're trying to get some data together, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm doing a project. I think I'm setting up a community interest company so that you can tag models and connect your databases to the 3D models. So yeah, I've got to go for funding now. So if anybody would like to write letters of support, I'd be really grateful. But there just seems to be a gap in the market at the moment, that people want to be able to tag their models, but actually have information kept on a simple database rather than things like K2 that English Heritage has been using.
Well, I think me and Nick maybe need to give you a hand to go through that directory and go and get the begging bowl out for you to see whether we can get you some funding, because that sounds like an amazing thing to participate in and to invest in. One of the other ideas we had, Mark Jackson's here, aren't you, is whether we could use some of the sort of databases that already exist. So this GIS system with the attached database, which is the Historic England Search the List database, and whether we can put in the add comments where people have put in photographs and things like that, whether we can put in links where people have done 3D models, so that you know, people know that those assets have been recorded. I don't know whether that's something that we can maybe work up with Historic England, or maybe we just try and do it with yours. You got your homemade models of the Clitheroe Wells, Mark, haven't you?
Yes, yeah. So it'd be quite. I think that'd be quite a good idea, really, to get them on the sort of enhancing the list. It just makes it slightly more accessible and brings them to life a bit more, as opposed to that sort of 2D picture from the sort of 90s that might be on there. People can go on, sort of have a look at it, swizz it round. Yeah, I think it's quite a good idea.
That thing that came over to me from chatting with Andrew Knight about disposal policies was, and also, you know, some of the just sheer capacity issues of putting things into archaeological data service or whatever it is, you know, how can we do this in a really light way, but also make sure that, I mean, these are amazing artifacts in their own right, that they don't just get deleted because there's nowhere to put them and there's nobody to curate them. Also, the point that Andrew made about the building being scanned over and over again, I mean, that makes no sense, you know. We want to be pushing forward, not just sort of repeating what we've done before. There's one from Gordon here. Gordon.
Yes, hi, sorry. I'm interested in finding out a bit more about the carbon footprint of the surveys that we undertake. Many of our clients in the bigger projects require, as I'm sure many know, you know, ESG reporting, some sort of answer to some questions. I think it's inconsistent. I'm not sure whether the answers are consistent. I'm not sure how they are dealt with is consistent. I think there's some guidance needed, but we need some research, and I think there needs to be some consistency. So I kind of feel it's a bit like QA was back in about 1989 or so, when people knew about it but didn't really know how much they were going to cost them to do it, and therefore sort of didn't do very much with it. I think some of the professional bodies could certainly help to bring that together and support the research, so there's some consistency in our profession.
You know what, that's a great idea, because you made me remember, until a couple of years ago, I was a trustee at the Property Research Trust, which does fund ESG projects. It's an international research fund, and it's quite competitive. I mean, it's got to be a really good proposal to go through, and they'll sponsor papers for I think the grants are about 5,000 British pounds to or the local equivalent for people to research things like that. And there's also, I've seen projects where I think, again, it might be, I have to look where I saw it, but I think it was Heritage Alliance or whatever, we're looking for people to participate in a project for calculating, carbon for their project. I think they were for like real world projects, but this would be amazing to do it for our digital projects and have a look at it, because I was shocked. Even that very rough thumbnail I did is like, how much carbon does it use to make and use one of these models? And it was like, crikey, quite a lot actually. And the data centers where they're stored are not particularly efficient. So I think that's a really great idea, Gordon. Do you know anybody who might be able to take that forward?
So as I mentioned in the sort of catch up in the chat there, there's a bit of reticence to share some of the findings that some companies have. I think they see it as some USP or some advantage they may have in being able to do some of this. I've been talking with UCL. They've done some research which they can't share for a period of time, but they've got some knowledge and it's building. So I think there are some groups out there, but as I say, we kind of know scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. In essence, I don't think many people are solving it in our sector. I think it's you can download some very basic models, but they're really for I don't know that you could rely upon that in an actual project or in a professional sense. But yeah, I don't know of enough areas or enough groups that are doing something and sharing. I think the sharing is the key part that's probably missing actually. There's probably quite a lot of knowledge out there, but it's just under the radar.
Historic England are looking at these sorts of things at the moment, but it's all work in process, so we're looking at many different aspects of that, not just the digital data, but the site travel, all of these associated things, but it's a fairly lengthy process to even assemble the base data sets, and so for us definitely it's still work in progress.
Well, it is, and I mean, as you can imagine, it is quite complicated, because if you've got someone that's using, AI tools, big data tools, the cloud, drones, lots of toys, automatic dogs, etc., and then you've got someone who comes along with a tripod off the bus and sort of sets up and takes a lot longer to do it, but generally derives something out of it. It's actually quite hard to work out who's got the more appropriate footprint for the activity that's going on sometimes. And I guess what would be interesting is whether, John, you think Historic England will share some of their findings or come up with an approach for the contracting side to adopt and follow.
Well, I think it's the intent to bring out guidance at the end of that process. Yeah, and you're absolutely right, and it kind of ties back to what do you need, and fitness for purpose. I mean, tailoring the equipment, the survey, the technologies that are used to address the brief directly, and find ways of minimizing expenditure in that way. That's a useful yardstick for sort of making sure that you're only doing what is necessary. I mean, James was right. James Kavanagh was right when he says, I mean, we're as surveyors, we're sort of hardwired to get the best result that you always can, but that's not necessarily always the most appropriate method to achieve what the client requirement is.
One of the great advantages, and I've been thinking about this all the way through the course, trying to lever the advantages of the heritage sector, is that we're maybe not quite as super competitive and cut and thrust as some other industries. And we've got some really big players, you know, with really huge asset portfolios like Church of England, who have ESG right in the heart of their mission, and that they would be able to, you know, maybe give you some support on something like that, Gordon, because out of self-interest, you know, out of trying to promote their own values and so on, and also to better care for their estate. If there are any other questions, I'll take them now.
Can I just ask Lynda, will you be producing anything from this? You know, I think you've got the bones of quite a nice sort of guidance booklet.
Yeah. I think really playing with what the outputs might look like. I mean, obviously we want to give the recorded sessions to Historic England as our sponsor. The other thing that I talked about with Bowler is whether we actually chop them into very small pieces, because actually dealing with small amounts of subject matter and having it sort of searchable is an easier way of doing it. I've also played with cheat sheets so that people can read the cheat sheet before they decide whether they want to sit through a whole recording. That might be another way of doing it. One of the legacies we proposed right at the start of this project was to make sure that these modules are made available to universities where they are teaching architecture, surveying, engineering, geospatial, you know, that all of the disciplines, we could get this material embedded in quite a lot of people's learning experiences, you know, through the more formal channels of academic research and CPD. Watch this space. Well, before I go, I need to just say this again, because I will be forever grateful to you. Oh, hang on. John's got his hand up.
I just wanted to say thank you, Lynda, for all the work you've done, and with all of the contributors to put this together. It's been a fantastic piece of work, and we are really very grateful for it.
I've had so much help from so many people, because it's not my core area of expertise. I'm not a geospatial. But I really need this stuff. So being able to have all these conversations has been amazing. Bye bye. Thanks now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.